The scent of mesquite smoke washed over me before I even caught sight of it, a thick, swirling haze of barbecue fumes rising into the sky, blending with the faint sound of unfamiliar laughter in the distance. My land, my quiet expanse of green pastures and gentle hills, had transformed into a chaotic spectacle of folding tables, high-end grills, and the delicate clink of crystal wine glasses. I squinted, struggling to wrap my head around the sheer nerve of what I was seeing. A full-on, upscale barbecue party had erupted right in the heart of my farm, and I damn well hadn't invited a soul. A woman stood at the center of it all, sporting an oversized sun hat and designer sandals, a cocktail in one hand and a clipboard in the other, issuing commands like a drill sergeant. Melinda, of course, it had to be Melinda. She was the self-proclaimed ruler of the HOA from the suburban enclave a few miles down the road, the same woman who'd once had the gall to dictate what shade of red I should paint my barn, even though my property wasn't under her control. And now here she was, commandeering my farm like she held the title. I marched forward, my boots grinding into the gravel, my heartbeat picking up speed with every step. A dozen HOA members buzzed around, chuckling, sipping pricey drinks, and treating my land like their personal country club getaway. Then I spotted it, steaks sizzling on a grill. My steaks. My beef, raised, fed, and butchered by my own hands. A quick glance to the side revealed two kids ripping tomatoes right off my vines, like they were shopping at an all-you-can-eat market. My stomach twisted, a slow, simmering rage building in my chest. "Excuse me," I called out, loud enough to slice through the chatter. Head swiveled. Melinda blinked at me, as if only now registering my presence, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face like I'd just crashed her private retreat. "Oh, Tom," she said, her voice oozing fake warmth. "So glad you could finally join us. Isn't this just lovely?" I stared at her, trying to figure out if she was kidding or genuinely that out of touch. "What the hell's going on here?" I asked, keeping my tone even, though my fists tightened at my sides. Melinda sighed theatrically, waving a hand. "Oh, don't be so uptight. We're just having a little neighborhood gathering. You know, bringing the community together, enjoying some good food in the great outdoors." "In the great outdoors," I echoed, my voice dropping low. "Melinda, this is my land." She let out a light, tinkling laugh, as if I'd said something charmingly quaint. "Well, it's not like you're using it. All this space just sitting here, it'd be a shame not to share it." I took a deep breath, wrestling the sharp edges of my temper. "You didn't ask." "Oh, come on, Tom. Do we really need to be so formal? We're all neighbors here. It's just a friendly little barbecue." She gestured grandly at the tables, the lavish spread that looked like a gourmet caterer had taken over my backyard. "We even brought our own supplies." I raised an eyebrow and nodded toward the grill. "That's my beef." Her smile wavered for a split second before she recovered. "Well, yes, but it's just a few cuts. Nothing big. You've got so much, don't you?" My jaw clenched so tight it ached. "And my vegetables?" I tilted my head toward the scattered piles of freshly picked produce, tomatoes, peppers, herbs I'd spent months tending, now being snatched up by strangers in fancy clothes without a care. Melinda shrugged. "Tom, really, it's not a big deal. It's just food. We'll be gone in a few hours, and you won't even know we were here." I let out a short, dry laugh. "Oh, I'll know." She sighed again, this time with obvious irritation. "I don't see why you're making such a fuss. This is why community cooperation matters. You need to learn to be more neighborly." "Neighborly," I repeated, rolling the word around, tasting its absurdity. Melinda had waltzed onto my property, helped herself to my food, and now she was lecturing me on being neighborly. The tension buzzed under my skin like a live wire. Then, slowly, I let my hands relax, my shoulders ease, and a grin spread across my face. Melinda narrowed her eyes. "What?" I shook my head. "Nothing. You're right. I should be more neighborly." Her suspicion deepened, but she was too smug, too wrapped up in her own entitlement to see what was coming. I pulled out my phone and made a quick call. 15 minutes later, the first trucks rolled in, then another and another. Big, dust-caked farm trucks unloaded the hungriest, roughest, hardest-working folks I knew. My crew, my farmhands, the ones who toiled from dawn to dusk, hauling, lifting, sweating, and burning through calories faster than Melinda's dainty HOA crowd could ever imagine. One by one, they climbed out, stretching, sniffing the air. "Smells good," one of them said, grinning. "Real good." Melinda stiffened as the first farmhand grabbed a plate and heaped it high with food. Then another. Then another. The HOA members shifted awkwardly, their polite chatter fading into uneasy silence as my people, my family, swarmed the barbecue like a pack of wolves on a fresh kill. I leaned back, arms crossed, watching the food vanish at lightning speed. Melinda sputtered, stepping forward. Wait, hold on. Who are these people?" I gave her my best innocent look. "Oh, just some good neighbors. Thought I'd invite them to the community event. You know, since we're all sharing." Her face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. "They're eating everything." I nodded. "Sure looks like it." A massive farmhand took a long swig of Melinda's imported wine straight from the bottle, wiped his mouth with his sleeve, and grinned. "Mighty fine party, ma'am." Melinda looked around, finally realizing she'd lost the reins, but it was too late. I could almost hear her brain screeching as she scrambled for a way to salvage her disaster. I patted her shoulder. "Enjoy the party, Melinda. And next time." I leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper, "Ask." She opened her mouth, probably to unleash some self-righteous rant, but I was already walking away, the sound of laughter and clinking plates trailing behind me. This was going to be good. The first hint that Melinda's grip was slipping came with the booming laughter from my farmhands. Not the polite titters of HOA small talk over overpriced wine. These were gut-deep, table-shaking roars that rolled across the field like a storm. Plates rattled as my crew dug in, piling their portions sky-high without a second thought. Steaks vanished from the grill in moments. Burgers were snatched two at a time, and trays of sides disappeared like they'd been hit by a tornado. Melinda stood rooted to the spot, her mouth flapping like a stranded fish, her pristine event, an elegant suburban take on a rustic barbecue, spiraling into chaos she hadn't bargained for. My farmhands were in full swing, and they weren't holding back. A grizzled ranch hand named Hank took a huge bite of steak, barely bothering with a fork. "Damn, this is some fine beef," he said, mouth half full. "Best I've had in years." A younger hand, Sam, slapped his shoulder and grinned. "That's 'cause it's Tom's beef. None of that store-bought nonsense." Another worker, Rosa, balanced a plate stacked like a small mountain and whistled as she passed Melinda. "Y'all sure know how to throw a spread. Didn't know HOA folks could cook like this." Melinda's fingers twitched, her eyes darting as she tried to process her unraveling masterpiece. She spun toward me, her voice sharp and choked. "Tom, you can't just bring people here like this." I leaned against a fence post, arms crossed, taking in the scene. "Sure I can. It's my land, remember? Just doing what you said, being neighborly." Her jaw locked so tight I thought she'd crack a molar. "They're eating everything." I feigned a frown, glancing at the tables. "Huh, looks like they are. Shame you didn't plan for a bigger crowd." Melinda whirled back to her HOA crew, hoping for support, but they were as stunned as she was. The once poised suburbanites clutched their plates like life rafts, eyes wide as if they'd stumbled into a war zone. A guy in a pastel pink polo tried to guard his food as two farmhands reached for the same rib platter. A woman gasped when a ranch hand grabbed her fancy wine bottle, popped the cork, and chugged it down. Then the music changed. Somewhere in the madness, one of my guys pulled out a banjo and started strumming. Another, Old Pete, clapped his hands and let out a whoop before belting out a full-on country tune. The vibe flipped from a stiff, upscale affair to a wild, rollicking hoedown. Farmhands stomped their boots to the rhythm. Others clapped along, turning my neat lawn into a dance floor. Melinda let out a strangled yelp. "Stop this. Stop this right now." Nobody stopped. If anything, it got louder. Two of my guys started a playful wrestling match smack in the middle of the party, tumbling across the grass as HOA folks flinched in horror. Someone dragged chairs over for an arm wrestling contest. Another tried teaching an HOA guest to two-step, only for the poor guy to trip backward into a table, sending a tray of appetizers flying. Melinda's fists clenched, her face blazing red. "This is a disaster," she hissed. I tilted my head, pretending to ponder. "Depends on who you ask. My guys seem to be having a blast." She turned to her remaining guests, pleading, "We can salvage this. Just stick to our side of the party." Her forced smile looked more like a grimace, but her people weren't listening. A few were already inching toward their cars, clutching purses and jackets like they were escaping a sinking ship. Others stood frozen, too polite to bolt. Then came the knockout punch. Big Ray, one of my heftiest crew members, grabbed the last burger off the grill and sighed contentedly. "Well, looks like we cleaned out the food." He smacked his lips and turned to Melinda. "Got any more, ma'am?" Her eye twitched. "No." Ray patted his belly. "Shame. I could go for another round." That did it. The HOA stragglers who'd been wavering finally broke. Clutching empty plates and wine glasses, they bolted for the parking lot, muttering rushed farewells as they sprinted to their SUVs. In minutes, Melinda's pristine, perfectly orchestrated gathering was reduced to a trashed lawn strewn with empty plates, tipped-over chairs, and half-spilled drinks. She stood in the wreckage, trembling with rage. This is fun," I offered. Her glare could have torched the field. "You ruined this." I gestured at the empty tables. "No, Melinda, you ruined it the moment you decided to throw a party on my land without asking." She opened her mouth, then shut it. For the first time since I'd known her, she was speechless. I could see her mind racing, desperate to twist this mess into a win, but there was nothing left to salvage. My farmhands, stuffed and happy, started packing up, slapping each other's backs and thanking me for the meal. I nodded back, watching the last HOA stragglers peel out, their fancy cars kicking up dust as they fled. Melinda stayed put, her flawless outfit now rumpled, her perfect persona shattered. She turned to me one last time, venom in her voice. "This isn't over." I smiled. "I sure hope not." She stormed off to her car, heels sinking into the dirt with every furious step. I watched her go, the final traces of her fiasco fading into the sunset. Turning back to my crew, I shook my head, grinning. Well, that was the best damn barbecue I've ever been to. They roared with laughter, clapping me on the back as the banjo's last notes floated into the evening air. The sun sank lower, casting golden shadows over the farm. Peace settled in again, at least until Melinda cooked up her next move. And I had no doubt she would. 3 days passed before Melinda struck again. I figured she'd come charging back with another sanctimonious rant about community and fairness, but she went quiet. Too quiet. That was the first clue something was up. The second was the official-looking envelope in my mailbox, stamped with the HOA's logo. I ripped it open by my truck, skimming the text, and a slow, incredulous grin spread across my face. A formal complaint. Melinda and her HOA were demanding compensation for me disrupting their private event, damaging their property, and causing unnecessary distress. The best part? The cost breakdown. $30,000 for emotional damages, $5,000 for lost food, and $10,000 for reputational harm. I whistled low, shaking my head. Melinda had lost her grip on reality, thinking I'd pay for food she stole from my farm and damages that never happened. I pocketed the letter, already plotting my next step. I called my lawyer, Doug, a no-frills guy who'd handled plenty of HOA nonsense before. I read him the letter over the phone, and he chuckled. That's cute. You want me to take care of it, or you want to have some fun first? I grinned. Oh, I'll handle it. Just get the paperwork ready. The next morning, I strolled into the county office and filed my own complaint. Trespassing, theft, property damage. Unlike Melinda's baseless claims, I had evidence. Security footage of HOA guests taking my food, clips of them yanking veggies from my garden, and enough witnesses to pack a courtroom. I made sure Melinda got my legal response that afternoon, along with an invoice, $35,000, the cost to cater a private event for 100 people using my farm's produce and livestock. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd show her how it's done. By the next day, word had spread. HOA members weren't happy to learn they were now tangled in a potential lawsuit because of Melinda's unchecked ego. Some called me, trying to smooth things over, but I wasn't in the mood to negotiate. The damage was done. She tried to flex power over land she didn't own, and now she was learning that actions have consequences. 2 days later, a knock rattled my door. I opened it to find Melinda standing there, looking rougher than usual. Her perfect hair was slightly mussed, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and that smug confidence had evaporated, replaced by something close to desperation. "We need to talk," she said, forcing a tight smile. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "That's so." She exhaled sharply. "Look, I'll admit things got out of hand. But this lawsuit, this invoice, it's ridiculous. We're neighbors, Tom. Do you really want to drag this through the courts?" I shrugged. "Didn't want to. But then you sent me a letter demanding money for a party you threw on my land without asking." Her smile flickered. "That was a mistake. Maybe we can both drop everything and move on." I pretended to mull it over. Tempting. But here's the thing, Melinda. I don't start fights I can't finish." She bristled. "Tom, I can't pay $35,000. I gave her a long, steady look. "Sounds like a personal problem." Her nostrils flared. "You really want to do this? Want to be known as the petty farmer who sued his neighbors?" I grinned. "Oh, I don't think I'll be the one with the reputation problem. Your HOA's already turning on you, aren't they?" Her lips thinned. She knew I was right. The HOA wasn't some elite powerhouse with endless funds, just upper-middle-class homeowners who wanted tidy lawns. Melinda had pulled them into a mess, and now they were scrambling to save themselves. I twisted the knife a little more. "Tell you what, drop your complaint, pay for the food your guests took, and I'll withdraw my lawsuit." Her eyes darkened. "That's still over $5,000. I shrugged. "Better than $35,000. Her hands balled up at her sides. She knew she was cornered. After a long, tense pause, she nodded sharply. "Fine." 2 days later, the payment came through in full. I kept my word and dropped the lawsuit, but the fallout was already done. Melinda was voted out as HOA president the next week. Her own members had lost trust in her, and no one wanted to be tied to the woman who'd nearly tanked their suburban kingdom over a barbecue. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cold beer, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The farm was quiet again, just how I liked it. The last traces of Melinda's debacle were gone, and things were back to normal, for now. I had no doubt she'd dream up some new scheme eventually, some fresh way to try and control a world she didn't own. But now she knew something she hadn't before. My land wasn't just empty space to be claimed. It wasn't up for grabs, and it sure as hell wasn't hers. Next time, she wouldn't underestimate the farmer who wouldn't budge.